My great-aunt left her mansion to whoever could solve the riddle in her will, and the answer destroyed our family. Aunt Margaret was the mysterious rich one who lived alone in that massive Victorian house on Elm Street. She never married, never had kids, and spent her days collecting hundreds of antique music boxes. Every family gathering, she'd sit in the corner, winding them up, listening to their tiny melodies while the rest of us made small talk. When she died at 89, suddenly everyone remembered how much they loved dear Margaret. The funeral was packed with relatives I hadn't seen in decades, all wearing their most respectful black outfits while their eyes practically sparkled with dollar signs. Her lawyer called a meeting at his downtown office. 43 relatives crammed into that stuffy conference room like sardines. Cousins who'd been feuding for years sat elbow to elbow, united by greed. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. Margaret's entire estate, valued at $4.2 million, goes to whoever can solve this riddle. Find what I treasured most. It's hidden where the music never stops playing. The room erupted. Everyone started whispering strategies, forming alliances, plotting their search methods. Within hours, that mansion looked like a crime scene. Dad brought a sledgehammer and demolished Margaret's music room wall by wall, convinced she'd hidden a safe behind the plaster. Mom systematically dismantled every single music box with a screwdriver, checking for secret compartments filled with bearer bonds or jewelry. Cousin Jake hired a metal detector guy and spent 2 days digging up the rose garden. Aunt Linda crawled through the attic with a flashlight, pulling up floorboards. Uncle Pete even brought a jackhammer to check under the basement concrete. I was 17 and mostly just following my Uncle Rick around, carrying his toolbox while he checked every possible hiding spot. We'd been searching for 3 days straight when I heard something weird coming from the basement corner. Faint music, like a music box playing somewhere behind the walls. "Uncle Rick, listen," I whispered. We pressed our ears against the old wooden paneling. The melody was definitely coming from inside the wall. Rick grabbed his crowbar and started prying at the panels. Behind the false wall was a tiny hidden room, maybe 4 feet by 6 feet, barely big enough to stand in. Inside, a single music box sat on a small wooden table, its melody playing on an endless loop. Next to it was a hospital bracelet, a pair of tiny blue baby shoes, and a yellowed envelope. My hands were shaking as I opened the letter. Margaret's handwriting, dated March 20th, 1962. My dearest Thomas, born March 15th, 1962. They made me give you up when I was 16, said it would ruin the family name. I was allowed to hold you for 3 days in the hospital before the adoption agency took you away. This music box played in your hospital room, the only lullaby you ever heard from your real mother. I've wound it every single day for 60 years, keeping the music alive for the son I never got to raise. I hope someday you'll forgive me for not being brave enough to fight for you. I stared at the hospital bracelet. Baby Thomas Wilson, born March 15th, 1962. My dad's name is Thomas Wilson. His birthday is March 15th, 1962. The room started spinning. My dad, who'd been adopted as a baby and never knew his birth parents, was standing 20 feet away in the basement, sledgehammering walls, looking for Margaret's treasure. I called him over with a voice that barely worked. When he saw the letter, the baby shoes, heard that music box melody, his face went completely white. "She's been watching me my whole life," he whispered. Every family gathering, every holiday, she knew. That's when it all clicked. Margaret never married because she spent 60 years mourning the child she lost. She collected music boxes because they reminded her of those 3 precious days with her son. The music box suddenly clicked, and a small compartment popped open underneath. Inside was a microcassette recorder, the kind from the 80 seconds, with a tape labeled, "Play if Thomas finds this." Dad pressed play with shaking hands. Margaret's young voice filled the room. "Thomas, if you're hearing this, you need to know the truth about why I really gave you away. It wasn't shame or family pressure. The man who got me pregnant, your biological father, he threatened to kill you if I didn't give you up for adoption. He's still alive, he's still dangerous, and he's been at every single family gathering we've ever had." The tape kept playing, and when she said his name, everyone in that basement turned to look at one person, Uncle Pete. The silence lasted maybe 3 seconds before Pete's face went from confused to absolutely white. His mouth opened like he was going to say something, but nothing came out. Dad was just staring at him with this look I'd never seen before, kind of like he was seeing a stranger for the first time. "Tom, I don't know what." Pete started backing toward the stairs. Dad moved so fast I barely registered it. He tackled Pete halfway up those basement steps, and they both went crashing through the wooden railing, hitting the concrete floor with this sickening thud that made everyone scream. Dad landed on top, and honestly, I thought he was going to kill him right there. "Dad, stop!" I yelled, running over. Mom was screaming too, and Uncle Rick pulled Dad off while Pete curled up on the floor, blood running from his nose. That's when I saw Pete's phone had fallen out of his pocket. The screen was cracked but still lit up, showing a text conversation. I grabbed it before anyone noticed. The messages were to someone saved as M.W. Margaret Wilson. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through. You can't tell him. I'll make sure you don't. That was from 2 weeks before Margaret died. I know what you did in 1962. The money stops or everyone finds out. That was from Margaret, dated 3 weeks ago. You've already taken enough from me. Another one from Pete, dated the night before Margaret's death. This ends tonight. I showed Dad the phone, and his face went from rage to something worse, something cold. What did you do? Dad's voice was barely above a whisper. What did you do to her? Pete was trying to sit up, holding his bleeding nose. Tom, listen to me. You don't understand the full story here. Then explain it, Dad roared, and the whole basement went silent. Even the people still searching upstairs had come down to see what happened. Pete looked around at all of us, at the 40-something family members now staring at him like he was some kind of monster. He wiped blood off his face with his sleeve and actually laughed, like genuinely laughed. You want the truth? Fine. I've been paying Margaret $50,000 a year for the last 60 years. 60 years. Do you know how much money that is? $3 million, give or take. All to keep her quiet about what happened. You raped her, Dad said flatly. She was 16. She was convenient, Pete shot back, and I swear half the room gasped. And she made a choice. I gave her options. Keep the baby and I'd make sure neither of you survived. Or give him up and get paid for her silence. She chose the money. Every year, like clockwork, she'd call me up and I'd send another check. Mom stepped forward, her face twisted with disgust. You're saying you've been blackmailing? No, wait. She was blackmailing you? Potato, Pete said, shrugging. Point is, Margaret's death was natural, heart failure. The woman was 89 years old. It happens, but I was still looking at his phone, at that last message. This ends tonight. You went to her house, I said, and everyone turned to look at me. The night before she died, you were there. Pete's smile faded. Prove it. That's when Mom knelt down next to the music box. Her hands were shaking as she reached underneath the table it sat on. She pulled out another compartment I hadn't even noticed, hidden in the table leg. Inside was a stack of photographs. The top one showed Pete entering Margaret's front door. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. the night before she died. The next photo showed him leaving at 1:23 a.m. There were others too. Pete at the pharmacy, Pete buying something from behind the counter, Pete in Margaret's kitchen. Margaret had been watching him right back. She set you up, Dad said quietly. She knew you'd come after her if she threatened to tell, so she documented everything. The family erupted into chaos. Half of them were shouting to call the police. The other half were yelling that we should handle it ourselves, that involving authorities would drag Margaret's name through the mud. Cousin Jake was already on his phone, probably calling 911. Aunt Linda was crying. Uncle Rick looked like he wanted to take his own swing at Pete, but Pete just sat there on that basement floor, blood on his shirt, looking almost relieved that it was finally over. You want to know the really funny part? Pete said, looking straight at Dad. Margaret left a second will, with her real lawyer. If Thomas doesn't solve the riddle within 30 days, everything goes to someone else. Someone named J.S. Dad froze. What are you talking about? Today's day 29, Tom. You found the music box, found the tape, great, but you didn't solve the riddle. Margaret said whoever could solve it gets the estate. Not whoever finds a tape, not whoever discovers her secret. Whoever solves the actual riddle. Find what I treasured most. You think that was you? Pete laughed again, darker this time. Margaret treasured a lot of things, and she made damn sure her real heir would get everything if you failed. Who's J.S.? I asked. Pete smiled with bloody teeth. Why don't you ask her yourself tomorrow when she shows up to claim the estate? The room went silent except for that damn music box still playing its melody in the corner. Dad looked at me, then at the lawyer's card sitting on the table next to the music box. We had less than 24 hours to figure out what Margaret really wanted us to find. And Pete, despite being exposed as a rapist and possible murderer, was still controlling the situation from the floor. Get out, Dad finally said to Pete. Get out of this house before I actually kill you. Pete stood up slowly, wiping more blood from his face. Gladly. But Tom, when J.S. takes everything tomorrow, remember that Margaret chose this. She chose to leave you with nothing but a guilt trip and a music box. He limped up the stairs and out of the basement. We all just stood there, listening to his footsteps fade away across the main floor. Then the front door slammed shut. Mom was the first to speak. We need to figure out who J.S. is, right now. Dad shook his head. No. First we need to know if he actually killed her, because if he did, none of this inheritance matters. He's not walking away from this. The police, Uncle Rick started. The police will take weeks to investigate, Dad interrupted. Weeks we don't have, and Pete knows that. He's counting on the clock running out. I looked at the phone still in my hands, at those text messages, at the evidence Margaret had collected in photographs. Then we go to his house, I said. Tonight. We find proof. Dad met my eyes. For a second I thought he was going to tell me no, that it was too dangerous, that I should stay out of it. But instead, he nodded. Tonight, he agreed. The rest of the family filed out slowly, shocked and confused. Some were still talking about calling the police. Others were arguing about the inheritance, about who J.S. could be, about whether we should just let it go. But Dad and I stayed in that basement, staring at the music box that had held Margaret's secrets for 60 years. Your birth mother, I said quietly. She really loved you. Dad's hand was trembling as he reached out and touched the tiny baby shoes. I know. We left the mansion at midnight. Dad drove his truck, not saying much, just gripping the steering wheel like he was trying to strangle it. I kept Pete's phone in my lap, scrolling through messages, looking for anything else useful. Pete's house was on the other side of town, a nice 2-story colonial with a manicured lawn. All the lights were off when we pulled up. His wife left him 5 years ago, Dad said. Kids don't talk to him. He lives alone. Good, I muttered. We parked down the street and walked up through the neighbor's yard to avoid the front camera Pete probably had. The back door was locked, but Dad had brought his lockpick set. He'd been a locksmith before switching careers, and his hands still remembered. The door clicked open in less than a minute. Inside, Pete's house smelled like old coffee and cigarettes. We used our phone flashlights to navigate, keeping them low. The kitchen was first. Dad immediately went for the medicine cabinet above the sink. What are you looking for? I whispered. Digoxin, he said. It's a heart medication. Small doses help, large doses kill. Margaret's medical records should be somewhere in this house if Pete was monitoring her condition. I started searching the living room. Bills, junk mail, old newspapers. Nothing interesting until I found a file cabinet in his office, locked with a combination lock. Dad, I hissed. He came over, tried a few combinations, then just ripped the whole drawer open with a crowbar he'd found in Pete's garage. The metal bent and screeched. Inside was a gold mine. Medical records for Margaret Wilson, going back 6 months. Lab reports showing elevated digoxin levels. A prescription bottle with Pete's name on it, half empty, dated from a year ago. Notes in Pete's handwriting about dosages and timing. Jesus Christ, Dad breathed. He documented everything. Why would he keep this? I asked. Because he's a narcissist, Dad said. He wanted a record of what he'd done, some sick trophy. We kept digging and found something even worse. A ledger, handwritten, showing financial transactions. $50,000 paid to Margaret every year, like Pete had said, but also hundreds of smaller transactions to other accounts. Money moved around, hidden, redistributed. He's been embezzling, I realized. From the family trust fund. Dad flipped through pages, his face getting darker. $2.8 million, over 15 years. He's been stealing from all of us and using some of it to pay Margaret off. That's when I found the burner phone in the back of the drawer. A cheap flip phone with one contact saved. J.S. I showed Dad, and his jaw clenched. Call it. What? Call the number. Let's see who answers. I hit dial and put it on speaker. It rang 4 times before a woman's voice answered. It's almost over, she said instead of hello. Is Thomas giving up yet? Dad and I looked at each other. I changed my voice slightly, trying to sound more like Pete. Change of plans. Meet at the mansion tomorrow at 10 a.m. instead of the lawyer's office. Silence on the other end. Then, why? Just do it, I said, and bring the gun like we discussed. Fine, she snapped. But if you're backing out, I'm not, I interrupted. 10 a.m. Don't be late. I hung up before she could say more. Gun? Dad said. This J.S. person is armed. I was scrolling through the burner phone's messages now. Texts between Pete and J.S. going back months. Planning Margaret's death. Discussing how to split the estate once Thomas failed to solve the riddle. Timelines, dosages, backup plans. They're partners, I said. Pete and whoever this is, they've been planning this together. Dad took the phone and read through everything, his face getting harder with each message. J.S. helped him poison Margaret. They made it look like natural heart failure. The plan was Pete would ensure I never solved the riddle in time. Then J.S. would claim the estate per Margaret's second will, and they'd split everything 50-50. But who is she? I asked. Why would Margaret leave her estate to someone working with Pete? Dad kept reading and then stopped dead on one message. He showed me the screen. Pete, I still can't believe she's my mother. After everything she did, leaving me at that orphanage, she owes me this money. We're just taking what should have been mine anyway. J.S. is Margaret's daughter, Dad said quietly. I have a half-sister. We sat there in Pete's office, surrounded by evidence of murder, embezzlement, and betrayal, processing this new bomb Margaret had left behind. She was pregnant twice, I said. First you, then this girl. Both times Pete was the father, Dad finished. Both times she gave us up, but this daughter somehow found Pete, found Margaret, and decided to help kill her for the inheritance. We need to get to that mansion before 10 a.m. tomorrow, I said. Catch her with her guard down. Dad was already photographing every page of the ledger, every medical record, every text message. We spent 2 hours documenting everything in that office, making sure we had copies of all evidence. Just as we were about to leave, I found one more thing. Hidden in a fake book on Pete's shelf, hollowed out inside, was a stack of old photographs. Margaret as a teenager, pregnant. Margaret holding a baby. Margaret at what looked like an orphanage, handing a small child to a nun. The girl looked about 2 years old. I flipped the photo over. Jessica Sterling, June 1964, written in Margaret's handwriting. That's JS, I said. Jessica Sterling. Dad stared at the photo, at the little girl who would grow up to help murder her own mother. Let's go, he finally said. We have less than 9 hours before she shows up. We left Pete's house the way we came, locking the back door behind us. As we drove away, I saw a light turn on in Pete's upstairs window. He was home. Had probably been there the whole time, just watching us from the dark. The next morning, Dad and I arrived at Margaret's mansion at 8 a.m. We had the photos, the ledger, Pete's burner phone, everything. We also had Uncle Rick and Mom, who we'd called at 6 a.m. to fill them in. This is insane, Mom said, pacing in Margaret's foyer. We should call the police right now. And tell them what? Dad countered. That we broke into Pete's house and found evidence? It'll all be inadmissible. Jessica will claim we planted it. Pete will deny everything. Margaret will still be dead, and we'll have nothing. So what's the plan? Uncle Rick asked. Dad held up the burner phone. We pretend to be Pete, get Jessica to confess on recording, then we have her and Pete both on tape admitting to murder. And if she realizes you're not Pete? Mom asked. Then we adapt, Dad said simply. At 9:45 a.m., we heard a car pull up outside. Through the window, I watched a woman in her late 50s step out of a BMW. She was tall, with Margaret's same dark hair, now streaked with gray. She moved with this kind of angry confidence, like the world owed her something. Jessica Sterling, my aunt, my dad's half-sister, Margaret's murderer. She rang the doorbell. Dad waited 30 seconds, then opened it. Jessica's face went from expectant to confused to hostile in about 2 seconds. Who the hell are you? She demanded. Thomas Wilson, Dad said calmly. Margaret's son, your half-brother. Jessica's hand immediately went to her purse, and I knew that's where the gun was. Dad held up his hands. Before you do something stupid, you should know that everything you and Pete discussed is on video right now, streaming to my lawyer's office. He was bluffing. We had no such setup, but Jessica didn't know that. Her hand stayed on her purse. Video of what? Of you walking up to this door, I said, stepping into view. Of you admitting to helping Pete poison Margaret. Of you planning to claim her estate. All of it. You're insane, Jessica spat. I don't know what you're talking about. Then why are you here? Dad asked. Why did Pete tell you to come meet him at 10 a.m.? Why did you bring a gun? Jessica's eyes narrowed. You went through his phone. We went through his whole house, I said. Found the medical records, the ledger, the burner phone, the photos. We know everything. For a long moment, Jessica just stared at us. Then she started laughing. Do you? She asked. Do you really know everything? Did Margaret tell you that she kept me in an orphanage until I was 8, while she paid Pete to keep quiet about you? Did she tell you that she could have raised us both, but she chose to pretend we didn't exist so she could keep her precious reputation? She was 16, Dad said quietly. Pete raped her. Twice, Jessica corrected. He raped her twice, 3 years apart. And both times, she gave away the evidence rather than face the scandal. So yeah, when Pete contacted me 5 years ago, told me who I really was, who my mother was, I was angry. I wanted what she owed me. So you helped him kill her, I said. Jessica's hand finally left her purse, but only to cross her arms. I helped him accelerate the inevitable. She was 89 years old. The digoxin just moved things along. She was going to die anyway. That's still murder, Mom said from behind us, and Jessica actually looked surprised to see her there. Who else is here? Jessica demanded. Everyone, Dad lied. The whole family, all listening to you confess. Jessica pulled out her phone, and I tensed, thinking she was calling Pete. Instead, she hit play on a voice recording app. Everything we just said, Jessica said, smiling coldly. I recorded it all. You just confessed to breaking and entering, theft, harassment. So even if you have evidence against me, I have evidence against you. Mutually assured destruction. How's that for a family reunion? Dad stepped forward, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Not anger, something colder. Give me the gun, he said. Excuse me? Jessica actually laughed. The gun in your purse. Hand it over, or I call the police right now and let them sort this out. Your confession, our evidence, all of it public record. Let's see who a jury believes. Jessica's smile faded. She calculated, weighed her options, and I could see the exact moment she realized Dad was serious. Slowly, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small pistol. A .38 revolver. She held it by the barrel, offering it to Dad. He took it, checked that it was loaded, then handed it to Uncle Rick. "Hold on to this." "Where's Pete?" Jessica asked. "He was supposed to be here." "Change of plans," I said, holding up the burner phone. "That was us you talked to last night. Pete doesn't know you're here." Jessica's face went white. "You set me up. You killed my mother," Dad said simply. "Yeah, we set you up." That's when Jessica lunged at him. Not for the gun, but with her keys, swiping at Dad's face like claws. Mom screamed. I jumped forward, and Uncle Rick caught Jessica's arm mid-swing. She thrashed and fought, screaming obscenities, but Rick was a big guy and held her easily. "Let me go," Jessica shrieked. "You have no right. She abandoned us. Both of us. She deserved what she got." Dad just looked at her with this profound sadness. "Did you know she kept photos of you? Your whole life. She hired private investigators to track you down after Pete told her what he'd done. She tried to reach out when you turned 18, but Pete scared her off. Threatened to kill you just like he'd threatened to kill me." Jessica stopped struggling. "You're lying." "Prove it," Dad said. He turned and walked deeper into the mansion, toward Margaret's bedroom. We all followed, Rick still holding Jessica's arm. In Margaret's room, Dad opened her closet and pulled out a box from the top shelf. Inside were hundreds of photographs. Me as a baby, a toddler, at my high school graduation. And mixed in were photos of a young girl growing up. Jessica in pigtails at an orphanage. Jessica at her middle school graduation. Jessica getting married to some guy in the 90 seconds. Jessica at a hospital, holding a newborn baby. She watched both of us, Dad said quietly. She was too afraid to reach out, but she never stopped caring. The inheritance, the riddle, all of it was her way of trying to give us what she couldn't give us when we were young. A chance to know the truth, to know each other, to know her. Jessica was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. She slid down to the floor, surrounded by photos of a life watched from a distance. "I killed her," Jessica whispered. "I killed my own mother for money." "Yeah," Dad said. "You did." Uncle Rick called the police while Mom sat with Jessica, not comforting her but making sure she didn't run. I helped Dad collect all the evidence we'd gathered. The police arrived 20 minutes later. We gave them everything. The medical records, the ledger, the texts, Jessica's recorded confession, her gun, all of it. They arrested Jessica right there in Margaret's bedroom. As they led her out in handcuffs, she looked at Dad one more time. "She should have fought for us," Jessica said. "She should have been brave." "Yeah," Dad agreed. "She should have. But Pete made sure she couldn't be. He took that from all of us." Jessica was put in the back of a police car, and we watched it drive away. "What about Pete?" I asked. Dad checked his watch. "It's 10:30. We still have until tonight to solve the riddle and claim the estate. Let's make sure we can do that before we deal with Pete." We called Margaret's lawyer, the real one Jessica had mentioned. He confirmed that yes, there was a second will, and yes, if the riddle wasn't solved by midnight tonight, the estate would default to Jessica Sterling. But now that Jessica was arrested for murder, the inheritance would be frozen in probate for years, probably decades, unless Dad could solve the riddle first. "What did Margaret treasure most?" Mom asked. "We found the music box, the tape, the truth about Pete. Isn't that the answer?" Dad shook his head. "That's what Pete thought. But Margaret was smarter than that. The riddle says, hidden, where the music never stops playing. The music box in the basement stopped playing when we opened it. So that can't be the real answer. Where else did she keep music playing?" I asked. Dad's eyes widened. "Her bedroom." We raced back upstairs to Margaret's room. On her nightstand was another music box, smaller than the others, playing a soft lullaby on an endless loop. Dad carefully opened it. Inside was a key, small, silver, with a number engraved on it. 2,847. "Safety deposit box," Uncle Rick said immediately. We called the lawyer back. "Did Margaret have a safety deposit box?" "Yes," he confirmed. "At First National Bank, box 2847. We drove there immediately, key in hand. The bank manager verified Dad's identity as Margaret's son and led us to the vault. He used the bank's master key along with Margaret's key to open box 2847. Inside was a thick envelope and 60 smaller envelopes, each labeled with a year from 1962 to 2022. Dad opened the thick envelope first. Inside was a letter in Margaret's handwriting, dated 1 month before she died. "Thomas, if you're reading this, you solved my riddle. What I treasured most wasn't hidden in a music box or a secret room, it was hidden in time. In every year I couldn't be your mother, I wrote you a letter. 60 years of birthdays I missed, Christmases I didn't share, milestones I could only watch from afar. These letters are what I treasured most. My love for you, documented and preserved. Read them slowly, 1 per week for the next year, if you can bear it. And know that every day of my life, I wound that music box and thought of you. The estate is yours. Do something good with it. Help other mothers who are forced to give up their children. Help other children torn from their families by men like Pete. Break the cycle I couldn't break. I love you. I always have. Your mother, Margaret. Dad was crying. Actually crying. Tears running down his face as he held that letter. Mom put her arm around him, and even Uncle Rick looked misty-eyed. I picked up the first small envelope. January 1962. Happy first birthday, Thomas. You're 1 year old today, and I wonder if you're walking yet. We should go, Dad said, his voice rough. We need to deal with Pete before we read these. We brought everything back to Margaret's mansion. Dad called the family lawyer, showed him the key, the letters, the evidence that we'd solved the riddle within the 30-day deadline. It was 3 p.m., 9 hours to spare. The estate is yours, the lawyer confirmed. All $4.2 million, plus Margaret's house and possessions. And regarding Peter Sterling, the police are already looking for him. Jessica gave them his location during her interrogation. Where is he? Dad asked. Heading toward the Canadian border. He made it to Vermont before his credit card was flagged. There's a cabin there, owned by Margaret, still in her estate. The police think he's hiding there until the deadline passes. Dad looked at me. Want to take a drive? Mom immediately protested. Tom, let the police handle it. This is family business, Dad said. Pete threatened my mother, killed my mother, and stole from our entire family. I need to face him. Uncle Rick grabbed his truck keys. I'm coming too. We left Mom at the mansion with instructions to call us if the police found Pete first. The drive to Vermont took 4 hours. Dad didn't say much, just stared out the window, probably thinking about Margaret, about Jessica, about everything that had been stolen from him. The cabin was deep in the woods, accessible only by a dirt road that wound through pine trees. We parked half a mile away and walked in quietly, using the trees for cover. Lights were on inside. Pete's stolen truck was parked out front. He doesn't know the deadline already passed, I whispered. He doesn't know we solved it. Dad nodded. Let's keep it that way. We circled the cabin, Rick and I taking the back while Dad went to the front door. On Dad's signal, he pounded on the door. Pete, open up! Silence. Then footsteps inside. Pete opened the door with a baseball bat in his hands, ready to swing. When he saw Dad, he actually laughed. Came to beg? Pete asked. It's too late, Tom. Deadline's in 5 hours. JS gets everything, and she and I split it 50-50. You lose. Jessica's in jail, Dad said calmly. She confessed to helping you murder Margaret. Gave the police everything, including your location. Pete's laugh died. You're lying. We have the evidence, Pete. The digoxin, the medical records, the ledger showing you embezzled $2.8 million from the family trust. We have your burner phone with all your texts to Jessica. We have photos Margaret took of you entering her house the night she died, and we solved the riddle. The estate is mine. You have nothing. Pete's grip tightened on the bat. Then I have nothing to lose. He swung at Dad's head, and Dad barely ducked in time. The bat whistled past and slammed into the doorframe, cracking the wood. I came around from the back and tackled Pete from behind before he could swing again. We hit the floor hard, Pete fighting like a cornered animal. Uncle Rick grabbed the bat while Dad wrestled Pete's arms behind his back. Get off me! Pete screamed. You self-righteous piece of shit! You think you're better than me? Margaret was nothing. A whore who spread her legs for. Dad punched him. Not a wild punch, but a calculated one. Right in the jaw. Pete's head snapped back and he went quiet. Cable ties, Dad said, and Uncle Rick pulled some from his truck. We tied Pete's wrists and ankles to one of the cabin's sturdy wooden chairs. Pete came to a minute later, groaning. Blood dripped from his lip onto his shirt. You can't do this, he slurred. This is kidnapping. Assault. It's justice, Dad said. He pulled out Pete's burner phone and started making calls. One by one, Dad called every single person Pete had embezzled from. 17 families total, people whose trust fund investments had been quietly stolen over 15 years. He told them to check their email for a very important video link. Then he set up his phone on a tripod, pointing it at Pete tied to the chair, and hit live stream. What are you doing? Pete demanded. Giving you a choice, Dad said. You can confess everything right now on camera to all the people you stole from. Tell them exactly how much you took and why. Or I upload Jessica's recordings to every news outlet in the state, along with photos of Margaret's death scene, and let them crucify you in public. Your grandkids will change their last names. Your name will be synonymous with rapist and murderer forever. Pete glared at him, breathing hard through his nose. Tick-tock, Dad said. People are waiting. Within 10 minutes, 17 people were watching the live stream. Then 30, then 50. Dad's phone was blowing up with comments and questions. Pete looked at the camera, at all those faces watching him, waiting for an explanation. His empire of lies was crumbling in real time. I took the money, Pete finally said. Over 15 years, I moved funds from the family trust into offshore accounts. $2.8 million total. Why? Someone commented on the stream. Because I could, Pete said bitterly. Because none of you ever questioned me. You all trusted good old Uncle Pete to manage the finances. You were sheep. Tell them about Margaret, Dad said. Pete's jaw clenched. What about her? Tell them how you've been blackmailing her since 1962, how you raped her when she was 16, how you threatened to kill her baby if she didn't give him up for adoption, how you raped her again in 1964 and made her give up that baby too. Tell them everything. The comments exploded. People demanding answers, threatening legal action, calling Pete every name in the book. Fine, Pete shouted. Yes, I got Margaret pregnant twice. I told her I'd kill the babies if she kept them. I've been taking 50 grand a year to keep quiet about it. Is that what you want to hear? And her death? Dad pressed. Pete's face twisted. She was going to tell everyone. After 60 years, she suddenly grew a conscience. Said she was dying anyway and wanted Thomas to know the truth. I couldn't let that happen, so I convinced Jessica to help me. She was easy to manipulate once I told her who her real mother was. We poisoned Margaret slowly, made it look natural, and it worked. It would have worked if you hadn't found that stupid music box. The stream had over 100 viewers now. Screenshots were being taken, recordings made. Pete was confessing to rape, blackmail, embezzlement, and murder in front of dozens of witnesses. You're done, Dad said quietly. He ended the stream and called the police. While we waited for them to arrive, Dad made Pete sign a legal document Uncle Rick had printed at a nearby gas station. It was a confession and agreement. Pete would surrender his house, his cars, all remaining assets to the embezzlement victims as restitution. The document held up in court because Pete signed it willingly, under no duress except the alternative of having the stream video go viral. The police arrived an hour later. They'd been searching the woods for him based on Jessica's tip. They read Pete his rights and loaded him into their car. As they drove away, Pete looked back at Dad through the window. He didn't look angry anymore, just empty, broken, like he'd finally realized what he'd lost. We drove back to Margaret's mansion in silence. It was 11 p.m., 1 hour before the deadline officially expired, but we'd already won. Mom had cleaned up the basement and set the music box on the table, still playing its lullaby. The 60 letters from Margaret were arranged chronologically on the coffee table. What happens now? I asked. Dad picked up the first letter, the one from 1962. Now I get to know my mother, the way she wanted me to. He read that letter out loud to all of us. Margaret describing baby Thomas learning to walk, wondering if his adoptive parents were kind, hoping he was happy. The letter was full of love and regret and hope. I'll read one a week, Dad said, touching the pile of envelopes. Like, she asked. 1 year to get to know her. Over the next few days, the news broke. Pete and Jessica arrested for murder, the embezzlement exposed. The family scandal splashed across headlines, but Dad ignored most of it. He focused on what mattered. He donated half of Margaret's estate, $2.1 million, to adoption reform charities and organizations that help young mothers keep their children. The other half he split among the embezzlement victims, making them whole. He kept Margaret's house, the music boxes, and her letters. He blocked Pete's number, refused to take his calls from jail. Pete would be convicted on multiple charges and spend the rest of his life in prison. Jessica got a lesser sentence, 12 years, because she cooperated with authorities and showed genuine remorse. Dad never spoke of Pete again. He said some people don't deserve the energy of hatred. 2 weeks after everything ended, Dad stood alone in Margaret's music room, surrounded by hundreds of antique music boxes on their shelves. He carefully wound up the original one from the basement, the one that had played in his hospital room, and let its melody fill the space. As it played, he noticed the smallest irregularity in the box's base, a tiny bump that didn't belong. He pressed it, and another secret compartment popped open, so small it had been invisible before. Inside was one last key. Taped to it was a note. First National Bank, Box 4729. Dad drove to the bank alone this time. He opened the second safety deposit box and found 60 more letters, but these weren't from Margaret. They were from Jessica. Margaret had hired investigators to follow Jessica her entire life, just like she'd done with Dad. And starting in 1990, when Jessica was 26, Margaret had begun writing letters to her too. Letters she never sent, just like the ones to Dad. 60 letters explaining why she gave her up, how much she loved her, how she'd tried to protect her from Pete. Dad brought these letters to Jessica in jail. They sat across from each other in the visiting room, this stack of their mother's words between them. She wrote to you too, Dad said simply. Every year. She never stopped loving either of us. Jessica cried as she read the first letter. The one from 1990. My dearest Jessica, I found you at last. You're 26 years old today, and you look so much like me at that age. Dad left the letters with her, all 60 of them. Then he walked out of that prison and never looked back. He went home to Margaret's mansion, to his own 60 letters waiting to be read one per week for a year. He wound up the music box one more time, listening to the lullaby his mother had kept alive for 60 years. Make sure to click on the screen to watch another story.